I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and this is the PC Engine Files. Like, share, comment, subscribe. You already know what to do. In advance of recording this video, I looked up the pronunciation for the title of this game and was met by two different answers from Wikipedia. One was Märchen, and the other was Märchen. And I guess depending on which part of Germany or Austria you live in, one pronunciation is right and the other is not, but both are accepted. Either way, I'm going to go with Märchen since it's easier to say. It's a German word for fairy tale, and Märchen Maze is a fairy tale of Alice in Wonderland adapted to an isometric platforming shoot 'em up. Now, in the arcade, it was truly isometric. Everything was diagonally slanted, but in converting it to the PC Engine for home arcade, they did not try to replicate that, and it was probably for the best. The controls are a little difficult in the first place, and adding an isometric 3D view would only have made it substantially harder in my view. Now, Alice fell down the rabbit hole here, and she's trying to help the White Rabbit, or Usagi as he's known in this game, to free his country from the Queen of Darkness. And how is Alice going to do that? She's going to knock everybody over with bubbles. I'm serious. That's her weapon, and the longer you hold down the button, the bigger and more powerful it will become. But I really don't advise that. You want to use short, rapid-fire bursts to get the enemies out of your way as soon as possible, because it's not the enemies themselves that are the danger. If you hit them, you'll just bounce off of them. But the projectiles they fire will knock you back in a way that you've never seen knockback in any Mega Man or Sonic platforming game ever. Knockback in this case means like half the length of the screen. And if you're near a ledge when you do that, you're going straight over. You've got a limited number of abilities to get picked back up and dropped into the maze again. Sort of like when you're playing Mario Kart and you go over a cliff. You know that a friendly Lakitu is going to pick you up, although you're going to lose a few seconds and get behind in the race compared to everybody else. So going over the cliff is not advised in Mario Kart, and going over the edge is definitely not advised in Märchen Maze, because not only do you lose time, you lose one of those power-ups, and when you're out of those power-ups, it's game over, man. But there is good news. You can automatically restart at whatever round, as they call the stages here. You can go back to any round you've already completed. It offers you that option right at the beginning when you restart. You hit run and it says which round, and you select the one that you were previously on, and you can go back, or you can start from the beginning if you want. And once in a while, there are mystery boxes that you can open. Some of them contain an extra lift to pick you back up off the ledge if you fall off, which in this case you could just consider an extra life. Sometimes it gives you a shield that just absorbs all projectiles and enemy impacts that come your way until it wears off. It looks like a circle of rabbits moving around you, so that White Rabbit theme comes into play again. And I'm sure there are other power-ups that I haven't even discovered yet, but it's because it's a fun, but it's an incredibly hard game, especially because there are 3D jumping sequences in what is a 2D game, so you have to jump onto floating platforms and off of floating platforms. And I can only imagine this was even harder in the arcade at a fully isometric view, because it's hard enough to do on the PC Engine, and it's even harder when things are shooting at you. They could knock you off of a ledge or a platform at any time. And then the one power-up I discovered late in this playthrough was a floating feather hat, whatever it is, that makes my jumps bigger, but then makes it even harder to gauge where the jumps are going to land, because you're suddenly presented with new physics that you didn't previously have. And in a game where you need precise jumping from one floating platform to the next, that's not really so great. But I'm not knocking the game, even though there is a lot of knockback in the game. I think Merchant Maze is fun. I saw it on a list of games that should have been included on the TurboGrafx Mini, PC Engine Mini, games that were overlooked and shouldn't have been. And given that I had never played it before, I thought this is the perfect opportunity for me to find out if it's really as good as they say. And despite the difficulty, I would actually say it's pretty good. Or maybe because of the difficulty, if it was too easy, then I'd get bored with it quickly. But the challenge of learning these platforming areas makes me want to come back and do it more. And I guess the only thing that really bothers me is the knockback is just ridiculous. And you would think, well, just avoid the enemy projectiles, just move out of their way. But Alice moves so slowly that you can't really do that so easily, especially if they're right up close to you when they shoot. You're going to get hit and you're going to get knocked back because you can't move fast enough to get out of the way in time, unless there's a power-up that makes Alice move faster. I don't know. I mean, it sounds like I'm complaining. In some ways I am, but I also think it's a good game. I don't know if the arcade game is easier or harder, but I don't consider it a bad game, just one that I don't own a physical copy of. And since I'm talking about physical copies, let's see if I can find a price for it on price charting while I'm doing this voiceover. Now there's that funny umlaut symbol over the A, so I don't even know if this will look up correctly. Oh, it did. Loose, it goes for 66 complete, 110 new, 130. It doesn't look like copies of it go up for sale very often. The last one that was purchased was from a US seller in, well, over a year ago, as a matter of fact. So I suppose it might be a rare game, but it doesn't command the totally outrageous price that some rare games do. So by PC Engine standards, 66 loose, 110 complete is not cheap, but it's not the most outrageous I've ever seen. But given the difficulty of it, I would definitely say try it before you buy it. Get it in an emulator. I was sold on the Wii Virtual Console in Japan for a while, so if you imported a Wii with it on there, then you could play it that way too. It might even be cheaper to do that than to actually buy a physical copy of the game. You know that's saying something when importing a console with a digital download on it is cheaper than buying a copy of a game, but Wiis are commonplace, far more so than copies of Merchant Maze, so you definitely need to try it before you buy it, whether you get a console with it already on it, or whether you just play it through an emulator or an EverDrive. I highly recommend getting to know whether or not the difficulty of this game would be to your liking before you plunk down anywhere from $60 to $140, depending on the condition of the game that you buy. Because, and I'm being perfectly honest here, I'm playing it for the low cost of $0.00. I already had OpenEMU on my Mac, and there are plenty of places that have Merchant Maze on the internet. I'm not saying where, and I'm not giving you links, but if you go to a browser like DuckDuckGo and search for Merchant Maze PC Engine, you're probably going to find a copy, and it's not going to take you that long. So what you decide to do after that is up to you. And you know what? If this becomes one of those games that Namco re-releases later on as part of a digital download collection on something like the Steam Deck or the Switch, you could always buy it then and justify playing it digitally by owning it digitally later when it does become available commercially. It seems like it's been at least a dozen years or more since it was available that way through the Wii Virtual Console only in Japan. So it might be due for a re-release or even a remake. I could see it being redone with improved graphics and some accessibility options to make it easier or harder depending on your preference. It just depends on if it has that kind of cult following. And as I alluded to earlier, given the fact it was on a list of games that should have been included on the TurboGrafx Mini or PC Engine Mini that weren't, I think that cult following might exist. And if you released a digital version of it for anywhere from $5 to $20 with some extras, sure. At that point, I think the price would entirely be justified.